Hi, welcome to Little Mirrors. I'm Iolanthe,
And I'm Yule.
and we are very newly made parents. So, in today's vlog, we're going to be sharing with you what it's like to have a birth via C-section, which sounds pretty heavy, and I guess it kind of is. But I think that part of our purpose in sharing Little Mirrors is not to give a really varnished assessment of our experience of becoming parents, and we feel that being frank about the experience of birth is going to be valuable for you, and we're happy to share that. So, Bill, would you like to share a little bit of information about our lovely daughter?
So we had a young girl. Well, she's young.
She's a newborn.
She's less than 2 weeks old.
Yeah.
On the 5th of November 2020, and she was born in the Epworth Freemasons Hospital in Melbourne. And she's very healthy. And
her name's Egla. So that is a traditional Lithuanian name, which means both spruce tree, but it's also a Baltic goddess. We were unsure about whether or not we'd share the name, but I feel like in my waters, I think it's okay to share the name. What do you think?
Okay, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Becoming parents is really amazing and very intense. So I think that there's this period that we're in at the moment where you get submerged into this experience of there being no pattern, and it obviously begins with the birth. So let me share that we had an elective C-section. The reason that I chose to do that was it's probably dual. The first was because baby was in a frank position, and that just means that they're like a little U shape, they're like a diver. And we were told throughout our pregnancy that baby was very large, and that being in the U shape, that they would be unlikely to flip around. However, they did flip around, but by that time I was very heavy, very pregnant, and I had psychologically committed to having a C-section because I didn't really want to have a long and potentially traumatic labour followed by a C-section. I just felt like because the baby is large, that a C-section was the go. So I knew that several months ago that I was going to have a C-section, and it was something that we actually were both really quite adequately educated about throughout the process of pregnancy. Do you want to remark a little bit about getting comfortable with C-section?
Look, I think the idea of getting comfortable with C-section was more something for you. I don't really have an opinion on how you should have a child as my partner. It's your body and it's your decision, and it was your decision to be made with the obstetrician. So I was happy to go with whatever the call was. There are members of my family who have very particular male members of the family who have very particular views on how children should be birthed. So we didn't tell them about the decision to have an elective cesarean because it just wasn't worth the kind of argument, where it really has nothing to do with them as much as it has nothing to do with me. I was just there to support you through the process, and the decision wasn't lightly made. So yeah, that's all I can really say.
So bottom line is natural birth, ACE, C-section, ACE, all good. There's no judgment. I'm completely agnostic about it. I just chose to have a C-section. So in our previous vlog, we spoke about the surreal feeling of the lead up to birth. And I think that when you're having a C-section, there's an actual date. So you kind of know, it's like an exam date. So you know that it's coming up, and it gives you time to build probably a particular kind of anticipation. So in the days prior to C-section, what would you say your dominant couple of emotions were?
Like a nervous anticipation. There was a lot of everything. There's so much about it felt unknown and unknowable, and I think we were really, if I'm honest, I think I was overblowing things in my own mind about how much unknown there was about it. Because in reality, we'd gotten a lot of good education on it from our midwives and doctors and the people in that network about this is on the day, this and this is all going to happen, and in great minute detail we were told everything that was going to happen moment by moment. And this is really describing really about a 10-minute period that I think must be the period where people get overwhelmed.
Yes.
And I was overwhelmed receiving that information, and that kind of made me quite nervous and freaked out for the 2 weeks leading up to the day. But then when the moment arrived, I found that information to been really helpful, because it allowed at least me to be present and not overwhelmed by what's happening in the moment, so I could just be there to support you.
Yeah, I feel that in the days prior to the C-section, I had a feeling of not wanting to, of being curious that I was actually kind of calm and not wanting to freak out. That was my kind of dominant feeling, because it's a major surgery, and having a baby is a big thing. But I have to say that I'm really proud that at no point I became, as I'll tell you shortly, I became a bit scared just prior to the C-section. But overall, I wasn't freaking it off my skull. I was more excited to meet our baby than I was worried about the actual surgery itself. So I think that if you'd have asked me like a number of years ago if I wanted to have a C-section or any kind of major, an abdominal surgery, if I, could I avoid it by having a natural birth, I probably would have said I'd prefer a natural birth. So I'm actually, in some ways, I'm a bit surprised that I managed to handle it with such aplomb, but I think that is really a big credit to our midwife and our obstetrician, who, as you said, gave us all the information. So I didn't feel, at every point of what I'm about to describe to you, I felt like everything that was happening to me, I'd already been told about at least twice. And so that's very reassuring. So on the day of the birth, you wake up and you feel like it's kind of like a really freaky Christmas day. How would you describe the day of the birth, like when you wake up?
Yeah, it was like that.
Yeah.
It was a Christmas day where there's no decorations around the house, and you just get on with the vacuuming and cleaning the dishes.
That's right.
And trying to do the last little bits of tidying up, because we had Iolanthe's parents come to look after our pets and house sit for us while we were in the hospital.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure the house was nice and tidy for them, and also I think it was as much about preparing the house to bring our baby home into as it was for preparing it for them. So we were very busy.
Yeah.
All because the operation wasn't due till later in the afternoon. So we spent the first half of the day just basically cleaning and preparing and packing the car and over preparing in a lot of ways, I would say. It was
quite, it was quite nesty and methodical. We didn't seem super. We weren't super freaked out. We just had a normal breakfast. It was fine, but it is exciting because it's the day of birth.
It was both exciting, but we were also very calm.
Yeah, it was odd.
A very peaceful day.
Yeah, it was a peaceful day. We went to the hospital, and I'm actually going to describe this in some detail because I know that I had lots of questions that some of them are going to sound administrative, but I feel like if I had known about them, I would have felt a bit more relaxed. So we get in the car, and then we waved goodbye to the house. We took a selfie, and it's like the last selfie before we'd return to our home with our baby. So that felt, really special. We noticed we didn't have a lot of petrol. That's okay. We stopped. We got petrol on the way to the hospital. And then we went and we parked underneath the hospital. This is sounding basic, right? But for some reason, when you've got a car full of stuff for your as yet unmet child, knowing what you've got to do it's kind of soothing. So parked underneath, and then we went up to the birth suite, and there was a whole lot of just paperwork there, like just filling in Medicare details and all that kind of stuff, just administrivia. And then things sped up substantially. What happened then, Yule?
So they took us from the normal reception waiting room into like, not really a cubicle, but it was like a surgery sort of, behind the curtains that you see in hospital rooms.
Yeah.
And they handed me some scrubs, and they handed you a gown, and they asked us to change, and they weighed you, and I took the opportunity to weigh myself. Interesting factoid, we weighed exactly the same on the day of the birth of our child, and both of us were the heaviest that we've ever been in our entire lives.
But it was a lucky number because it was, excuse me if I'm speaking out of school, but it was 111, and that's like 3 angel numbers. Take from that what you will. I thought that was quite lucky.
We got a baby on the day, so it had to be lucky. We got a baby on the
day, so it was lucky. So we're sitting in this room, and they ask you your they ask you your details again and again, and then you have your procession of experts who come in. So we had an anaesthetist come in who just asks you some basic questions about your health and what you're allergic to. Just takes down some really basic information. It's probably sizing you up to see what your emotional state is, and just tells you what they're going to do in theatre. Our obstetrician came in. Cool. Everybody's like really relaxed and chilled out. She was probably just soothing. She didn't even ask particularly many questions.
I was like, oh, hey, see you in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. You guys all good? Yes, we're good. Okay, see you in there.
And there's a paediatrician who came in as well. So at that point, you're meeting the professionals in the theatre room. When you have a cesarean, there's around about 11 people in the theatre, which sounds really intense. And I'm glad that they told us before, because otherwise I think I probably would have found 11 people a little bit intense. So at that point, we're wearing gowns. We've met the professionals who will be assisting the surgeon, and then the person who's getting the C-section, they go into theatre first. So at that point, I had to say goodbye to Yule, and I had to put on my big girl panties, even though I was wearing no undies because hospital scrubs, and I went into the theatre. And the theatre, unlike what I had imagined in my mind, it was bright. It looked like a dentist surgery. It did not look like it didn't look like something from a medical drama. It was a very bright lit room. People were speaking amongst themselves, but in a way that wasn't, disrespectful or anything like that. And they asked me to sit up on on the gurney, I suppose. And then the anaesthetist wiped a very cold anaesthetic on my back. So, and he gave me an epidural. Now, the epidural was not particularly painful. I wouldn't say. I was really worried about the epidural and if it was painful. It feels weird, but it doesn't feel terribly painful. And my obstetrician was holding my hands. And during that process, I think I can recall making a few sounds, distressed sounds. But overall, it was just a weird feeling. I wasn't overwhelmed by any kind of pain. And then I felt like a warm, relaxed feeling go all through my lower body. And I imagine there's probably something in that anaesthetic mix that makes you feel pretty relaxed and you feel fine. And then they lay me on my back and they put up a little screen in front of me. They got me prepped for surgery. And at that point, you came in. What was your feeling upon entering the theatre? Or what was it like waiting in the room without me?
It was it was really weird waiting in that room. It felt like forever because I was watching the clock tick down to the time of the appointment. So your surgery will be at 3:30 in the afternoon. Okay, I'm watching the clock. 20 past, half past comes 35, and they haven't come to call me because you must have been about 20 minutes. It must have taken about 20 minutes to do all that stuff separate from me at least.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting in there waiting for someone to call me, and then I got invited into the room. And it felt like theatre. It felt like a play. Like I was there to perform a role. Because you were already there and the stage was set. And I was there to support you and, kind of not ignore everyone else in the room, but just not be fazed by all of the goings on because there's so many people in the room. They're all busy. And yeah, I felt like they'd already pretty much started by the time I got there. Like I sat down next to you. You were looking very nervous, and I just, tried to reassure you and put my hands on your shoulders and look you in the eyes and make sure that you were that Iolanthe was comfortable. And you did start having, you were getting scared.
I can't actually remember quite a bit of this.
Yeah, so Iolanthe you were quite nervous and quite scared, and I just was there to calm you down and say, look, this is what we've been waiting for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it's just a couple minutes, and then you're gonna meet your baby. One thing that I could see them, I couldn't see the opening because there's a screen there. But what I did find interesting was how much pressure they were putting on you when they were trying to get the baby out, and like your whole body is shifting back and forward on the table. So I found that like, they're putting some elbow grease into getting that baby out. It wasn't like gentle.
Yeah.
And so I found that quite interesting. I don't know what I was expecting, but that there was a lot of physical movement of Iolanthe in her entire person in that moment. And I should mention that I also handed my phone to one of the theatre nurses to take photos for us, because we were going to be preoccupied for the next 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah. So in my mind's eye, once Yule came in, it felt like baby was almost there immediately. There obviously must have been a bit more time in there, as Yule's described. But for me, as an experience, I could feel pushing, I suppose, and movement. But really, I was actually quite relaxed. I felt very warm. I felt safe. And then before we knew it, the baby was out, and we said, "Oh, what? Is it a boy or a girl?" And they said it was a girl, and they brought Agla over the thing, and we saw our daughter, and it was just really magical.
Yeah,
it was really good.
She came out. She was very noisy, very angry. I think at being
rudely awake, rudely drawn into consciousness,
rudely evicted.
Yeah.
She liked it in there. But then, so I think what happened then was, it felt like it was more about me than it was about you, because the pediatrician then, held the baby up, inspect the genitals. They have them.
Yeah.
And then invited me around the table to while they do the next bit of prep, which is cutting the remnant of the cord off. They then weigh the baby, and I'm following them around the room, just like on the camera, like every moment, and just taking photo of them on the scale so we can record that's the moment we weighed their birth weight, and we caught all these tiny moments which happen in the space of, you were only in that room for half an hour.
Yeah, it's not long.
And there probably was about 5 to 10 minutes in delivering the child itself, but then there was a lot of just rushing around the room and then doing their checks on the baby and giving them their initial shots, and there's lots of little things that they do, but I was following the baby around, and I was told to follow the baby around with the pediatrician while they're preparing them and wrapping them up, and then they took me and the baby into recovery while they were still stitching you up.
Yep.
And you want to take it from there, because that's when we separated.
Yep.
For a little while.
So they at the point once the baby's delivered, everybody's like Mazel Tov. Everybody's really celebratory in the theatre. You feel very happy that bit is done, and then they immediately start sewing you up. So when you have a C-section, there's 5 layers, if I recall, of stitching that need to be done, and some obstetricians, surgeons use they stitch the top layer, or they use staples. In my case, staples were used, and I was really worried about what it would be like to have them taken out. It was totally painless. So if you have a C-section and somebody says staples, don't think it's going to be painful. It was completely painless.
Yeah, it's nothing like a school stapler.
Not like a school stapler. So what was nice was that when after Yule had finished wandering around the theatre with Agla, I was allowed to have skin-to-skin contact with her. So she was lying on my chest, which was really lovely. And then before I knew it, I was being wheeled into recovery, which is just a little cubicle. There was a very friendly midwife in there. Yule was in there, and our baby was in there, and they put the baby on me immediately. Whilst in recovery, which would have been only 45 minutes, they were constantly, every few minutes, like 5 or 10 minutes, they were checking with an ice block to see where the epidural was still effective. So they'd ask me, could I feel cold there? Could I feel cold here? Where could I feel the cold, to see how high the block was? They gave me painkillers. I was just so chuffed to be holding our daughter. I was so relieved that it was over and that I wasn't in pain. And then they took us to our room, and that whole process, from sitting in the little surgery together and being weighed to having our baby in our arms and our own room, would have been 90 minutes, maybe 120 minutes.
Yeah, 90 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
And you got to give Agla your her first feed.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So I put her immediately on the breast, and we've been fortunate so far in that, like, she just latches, and that was fine. It was really nice to be able to feed her immediately. So that was what the C-section was like. The first night, we found it makes sense to say that our experience at Epworth Freemasons was extremely good. We felt really cared for. I haven't been in pain. I felt really cosseted while we were there. Really controlled environment. And the first night, the first thing we did when we went back to the room, we were quite hungry, weren't we?
Well, you hadn't eaten all day, so that's one.
That's right.
That's one thing that does come with the C-section.
Yeah.
Because you know you're going to go in for surgery, they don't want you to eat, so you hadn't eaten all day at all. But I imagine when you're having natural birth, or any other kind of birth, that you won't know that, so you won't have survived.
You won't have. Bless you.
Excuse me.
You won't necessarily fasted, but so you could only that first 12 hours after. I think I only had like jelly and like broth and things that were liquid. And then from then on, I just started eating normally again. The first night after you have a C-section, you need to sleep in your own bed. So there was a little trundle bed that Yule slept on. And I was in my own bed. Another thing to note when you have a C-section is they catheterize you. I'd never had that happen before. It was also something I was quite worried about. I was a bit scared of. Didn't feel it. You're anaesthetized clearly, but I didn't feel it when it was removed. I didn't feel when it was put in, and I wouldn't have been able to move for that period anyway, so it needed to be done. And all through that period of that first 12 hours when we're in our room, I was feeding our daughter. We watched some television, we ate, nurses came in with pain medication. It was it was peaceful and uneventful. And then the next day we were moved into our own double room.
I actually found it very busy. So from the time we got into the room until the time when we could actually, it was just the three of us, and we could kind of check notes.
Yeah.
And check in with each other. Take stock of what's going on or what happened. It was probably about 5 hours after we got to the room, because there was constant visitors, like not visit. There was constant medical staff coming in. So the midwives, nurses, pediatrician. I think Shelley might have, the obstetrician might have come in and visited. So there was, and constant roll of them. So if the midwife comes once an hour, you've had 4 other visitors in that hour, and that was constant for about 5 hours, which for me, it's not all about me, but for me it was very frustrating.
Yeah, because you couldn't.
Because I couldn't settle in, but I couldn't check in with you, and I couldn't really have much interaction with the baby, so I'm really a third wheel in this place. So I found that quite frustrating, but it was only a short period of time in the grand scheme of things. And then they leave you to start having a rest, and they bring you food, and then we could start having a chat and some cuddles and some photos and some.
And that's also when we called our families and we told them about the arrival of Agla, and that was really lovely. But that, in a nutshell, that was what having a C-section was like. I give it 10 out of 10. If we have more children, God willing, I'll probably have another C-section. Yeah, no hang-ups. It was fine. I felt cared for, and in the next couple of vlogs, these next coming Little Mirrors will be quite birth and first week centric, because it's fresh in our memory, which means that we're going to be able to recount it more accurately and frankly for you. But in the coming vlogs, we're going to be talking about the hospital stay and what happens in your 5 days in hospital, if you get 5 days in hospital. We're going to be talking about home, when we come home, and week 1, and the healing process. So those are going to be the next couple of vlogs that are coming up. We're pleased as punch, and we're very proud. We're doing well. This is a very hard thing to do, as I'm sure anybody else who has become a parent will attest, but it's a wonderful thing as well.
Yeah.
Have you got any warm-hearted things to say in closing today's vlog, Yule? How do you feel being a daddy?
I like being a dad. I feel it's the word. The word's not complete, because I was already complete, but I feel enhanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really nice. I feel similarly with being a mum. It feels like a culmination of a desire to move into this next stage of my identity, and I'm very, very delighted to be doing so with you all. So in the next week or so, we'll be able to fill you in on what a hospital stay is like. If you've got any questions about C-section, please feel free to put them in comments, and we'll catch you next time. I'm Iolanthe.
And I'm Yule.
And this is Little Mirrors.